My name is Allison Blake. I'm the Executive Director of the Abilene Area Chamber of Commerce, and we are honored to hold tonight's candidate forum here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library. Part of the Chamber's mission is to keep our members and the community up to date on government and legislative issues, and this also aligns perfectly with the Kansas Town Hall series, which began under direction of former Eisenhower Library Director Carl Weissenbach. His goal was to establish the Eisenhower Presidential Library as the town square of Kansas and increase the citizens' participation and understanding in the democratic experience. The Kansas Town Hall programs that they host here include debates, complex policy issues, panel discussions, and forums. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. Our moderator for this evening is an Abilene native, Tim Wilkins. He's a teacher at Abilene High School. And I'd also like to thank Eagle Communications for recording this event this evening. For those of you who have friends and family who weren't able to be here tonight, please let them know that this program will air on Eagle Channel 2 beginning on Saturday, October 13th at 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. and then again on Monday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. I believe. And you can also watch it online at EagleCom TV. So just a few little rules and housekeeping items. You'll notice that there are no political materials anywhere here on the premises because this is federal property, so we appreciate that. We do encourage the crowd to hold their applause until the completion of the candidate's response. And there will be no questions from the audience, but you are encouraged to stick around and visit with the attendees after the event. As I said, the moderator is Tim Wilkins, and he will read the questions as they were written. He won't editorialize. He can select the order in which they're read, though, and we do reserve the right to maybe eliminate some questions due to time constraints. I will be keeping time, and each candidate will be allowed a 1-minute introduction. Then they'll be allowed a 2-minute response to each of the questions, and a 1-minute response for follow-up if needed. And then we'll have a 2-minute chance to wrap up at the end. And then the candidate will be shown a yellow card like this one when you have 15 seconds left. And at the end of your time, I'll show this red card to indicate that you need to wrap up your sentence and move on to the next. So as for the schedule, I kind of passed some of those out, but we have, for the U.S. House of Representatives, LaPolice and Congressman Dr. Roger Marshall. From the Lieutenant Governor race, we have Hartman and Senator Lynn Rogers. And for Secretary of State, we have Rob Hodgkinson. Unfortunately, Scott Schwab was unable to make it. He was planning to be here, and he was disappointed to not be able to attend, but unfortunately he had a last-minute scheduling issue come up, so he won't be here. And then we have from the House of Representatives, Representative John Barker and Joe Schwartz. And for the Dickinson County Commission District 1, we have Doug Lindahl and Ron Roller. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator, Tim Wilkins.
Good evening and welcome. It is a privilege to be helping with this event, and I hope that you all leave as the evening wraps up a little more informed as to your vote in November, and also how to maybe help spread some ideas to those who weren't able to attend tonight. So without further ado, I think we will get started. So our first guests are running for U.S. House of Representatives. So if Mr. LaPolice and Representative Marshall would come up to the stage.
Great.
Okay, and as Allison stated, there's a 1-minute introduction from each candidate. So we're going to begin with Representative Marshall. Would you tell us just a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run and serve in the position?
Is that on? It is. Well, good evening, Abilene. It's great to be here. Big thanks to the Chamber for putting this on. The Presidential Library, always glad to be back here in Abilene. Who in the room is excited about our new Supreme Court Justice? Boy, I am. I'm excited. It's a great, incredible week to be in Congress. So many great things happening. It's a great day for agriculture, a great week for agriculture as well. Tonight, the president's going to announce that we're going to be able to sell E15 year-round. That's a huge win for our farmers. For anyone who grows sorghum or corn, it's a huge win. And just last week, getting the NAFTA agreement buttoned back up again, getting that improved. So it's just been an incredible week for agriculture. Maybe just to talk for 10 seconds, really proud of what we've been doing for the military and for our veterans. We fully funded the military for the first time in a decade. Lots of great things happening there, and gave another 5% increase in funding for our veterans. Very proud of those. Very proud that our national security is moving forward in the right directions, and look forward to your comments and your questions tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Representative Marshall. Mr. LaPolice.
Good evening. I'm Alan LaPolice, and I'm very grateful to have the congressman here tonight. I was told that there was some vote that was supposed to happen on the floor today, but fortunately that bill to take away blankets from homeless people and veterans got tabled. I kid, but at the same time, this gets to my greater point. The tragedy in America is that politics have hardened us, they have divided us, and they have made us all too unkind. We now have politicians who are at war with each other, and that war spreads to us. We have politicians that brag about taking away food from children and the working poor. We have politicians who brag about allowing polluters to dump toxins into our waters while we still can't clean up the drinking water in Flint. We allow politicians to give tax cuts to the fabulously wealthy that makes them just that much more wealthy, and we're promised that those savings are going to trickle down to us, and while we wait, we're told to fight with each other. We're told to be unkind to each other, and that's something that I can't tolerate. Many in Washington allow this kind of this hyperpartisanship, this polarization, and they actually applaud it. Even now, just mentioning Kavanaugh, it splits the room into those who believe and those who don't believe in him. And the tragedy is that we are divided. And until we can get past that, I don't applaud this division. I want to fix it.
Okay, thank you. We're going to begin with a question on agriculture, and Mr. LaPolice, you'll be given first opportunity to answer this question with a 2-minute response. The question is, with agriculture being the largest part of the Kansas economy, what is your take on the current administration's use of tariffs in negotiating trade deals?
I've been very clear on this. The congressman will say that he doesn't support the trades, but I believe that you follow what someone does, not what they say. I've never supported a trade war. No one wins a trade war. The tariffs are a tax. I can't believe any Republican in their right mind would support a tax. Presidents are not kings. Presidents are not supposed to negotiate trade. In the past administration, we were very upset when presidents took their pen and their phone and they did things by executive order. It should be no different now. The legislature, that's the body that we trust to govern. The legislature is supposed to establish trade agreements with all of our international partners. They're supposed to set taxes. They're supposed to set trade deals. They're supposed to pass NAFTA, TPP, TTIP, and the others. Not the executive. The executive is just supposed to be a cheerleader. They're supposed to be there to sign the legislation into law and give an annual State of the Union address. We don't have that currently because we have a Congress that has for many years abdicated their responsibility. They don't pass trade agreements. They don't pass the Farm Bill. I might say that the Farm Bill is absolutely 100% dead. It expired last week, and maybe they'll pass it in the lame duck session, and maybe they won't. I don't know that they have any real incentive to. So as far as the tariffs, I'm opposed to the tariffs. As far as the trade war, no one wins a trade war. And as far as the domestic producers, the Kansas farmers who are just asked to be patriots, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to sacrifice your 5th generation family farm because someone wants to settle a trade debt or a trade war with another nation. That's not our responsibility. That's not our job as patriots. So I'm opposed to them. Thank you very much.
Mr. Marshall, same question. Agriculture being the largest part of the Kansas economy, what is your take on the current administration's use of tariffs in negotiating trade deals?
Well, certainly agriculture is a big part, actually 60% of the economy in this district. I represent the largest agriculture producing district in the country. And from day one, I've said that I've been against the tariffs. I've communicated that to the president. I've encouraged him to use other methods to get that done. And that being said, I'm not sure if we would have been able to update NAFTA if the president hadn't done those tariffs. I continue to encourage him to find other ways to deal with China, and it's hard to argue with those results, though. The NAFTA agreement is much improved. There's certainly some help in there for dairy. We're going to be bringing more manufacturing jobs back to this country as well. It's going to give us access to world markets in a better way for our dried milk that we make here in Garden City as well. So I'm against tariffs, but I'm certainly in favor of opening up new trade markets. I'm excited that the European Union and Japan are both ready also to make a new deal. What I've encouraged the president, though, is to get all these other pieces done so we can gang up on China together. China steals about $500 billion of intellectual property from us every year. And additionally, they don't treat us like a good customer. And we're not only a good customer, we're their best customer, but yet they give other countries more advantages than we do our own markets. There's a huge upside in China. It's going to be challenging. What I would encourage people to understand is that the president's goals and his objectives are the same as yours and mine. He wants to open up markets. He wants zero tariffs, but every time he suggests that, all the other countries go running because they're able to take advantage of us as it is now. So at least going forward, I think that trade's going to be front and center for me. We've been very involved with it so far, and we'll continue to be involved with it. So I'm against tariffs, but unfortunately, that's the way the president's decided to take us.
Thank you. Mr. LaPolice, you're allowed 1 minute of response. If not, we'll move on.
Outside of NAFTA, our largest ag trading partner is China. So I don't know why we want to pick a fight with our biggest consumer of our ag products. It's very important to know NAFTA 2.0, it was written by previous administrations. NAFTA 2.0 is hardly an update from NAFTA. There's a tiny bit of dairy that we get to export into Canada, a tiny bit, but that's completely eliminated by the offset or all the other trade losses that we suffer. There's nothing for beef producers, there's nothing for grain producers except for a tiny reclassification of wheat in NAFTA 2.0. NAFTA 2.0 didn't have to happen. NAFTA 1 was just fine. It was written by previous administrations. Now, something that's very important about these trade agreements, we have established trading partners over the course of many, many decades. Right now, in Brazil, they are establishing 80 million acres of soybeans. In Kazakhstan and other Russian-backed nations, they've got so much land that they will take our wheat markets forever. Because of this trade war, if we lose our trading partners, it's not like there's not enough mouths to feed. There are, but there's more than enough land to feed them. We lose our trade partners, we lose forever.
Thank you. Next question, we'll move to perhaps a little bit more local issues of concern to these folks. We'll begin with Representative Marshall on this question. So you'll be allowed 2 minutes to respond. The question is, how would you or how have you defended the interests of Kansas on a national level, and perhaps of your district in particular?
Right. You know, I think first of all, I would start talking about the economy. Whether you think that roads, bridges, or education or our military is the most important priority, it all starts with a strong economy. So on day number 1, we started rolling back regulations. That got this economy cranked up. We did our tax cuts bill as well, and we were seeing like 5% wage growth here across the country now, even for the low wage earners. So number 1 is get the economy going. I think the number 2 concern of Kansas has always been national security. So we've continued to improve the national security as well as the international security. Farm bill is front and center for us. It's very close to being finished up. Unfortunately, the minority senator from Minnesota is refusing to, Michigan, Ms. Stabenow is refusing to do anything more with it until the election is over with. So the Democrats are continuing their obstruction and chaos. So working very hard on the farm bill. And then maybe lastly, I would talk a little bit about ethanol, which I mentioned already. And of course, trade we've talked about was picked by Kevin Brady, the Ways and Means Committee, to represent agriculture in the NAFTA negotiations. Was the first congressman to be able to talk directly with Ambassador Freeland from Canada about that. I've been to China, to Cuba twice, to Israel, trying to sell Kansas products. I was able to get rid of a 70% tariff on ethanol and dry distillers grain in China. So, you know, pretty much 24/7 I'm out there promoting the situation. I think about 70,000 agriculture guest worker jobs that we have in this state, trying to figure out an immigration policy that would help protect those jobs. Certainly working towards border security as well. So gosh, off the top of my head, there's a couple dozen.
Okay, thank you. Mr. LaPolice, same question. How would you defend the interests of Kansas and of this district on a national level?
This district is ag. And it offends me when our congressman applauds this robust economy, this amazing boom economy, when the Kansas economy is suffering. And it is. The ag economy is the Kansas economy, and the Kansas economy is suffering right now. We are in a slump like we haven't seen since the 80s. We are in a farm crisis. The last time we had this, it resulted in massive farm foreclosures, bankruptcies, and my friends leaving the ability to farm. So to applaud the Wall Street economy only speaks to who you serve. If you serve the Wall Street economy, then yes, the economy is robust. If you serve the Kansas economy, then you have to be upset by this trade war. And you have to be upset by the fact that we're not seeing any of the gains. There's no 5% wage increase. I don't know anybody that's got a 5% wage increase. Inflation is now above 2%, and that completely wipes out all of the tax cut incentives that middle-class workers got. So how do I defend the Kansas economy, our ag economy? Well, first off, let me say this, and let me be very clear. Farming and ranching are not partisan endeavors. These are not partisan things. Many of you are Democrats, many of you are Republicans. I don't care. Farming shouldn't care. I'm an educator by trade. I still farm, but mostly I educate. Education is not a partisan issue. Healthcare is not a partisan issue. As a doctor, you should understand that. These are not partisan issues. No one can represent a district unless they're going to be nonpartisan, especially in terms of agriculture, education, healthcare, hell, anything that we value. We as a nation are divided, so you cannot applaud this robust economy and this new nation that we're in when we are falling apart, when we are being torn apart at the seams. I'm not faulting any one party. I'm faulting partisanship. I'm not faulting you necessarily, but you applaud what's happening, and I denounce it, because unless we can come back together as one nation under God, indivisible, Kansas, we lose. And the United States, we don't even recognize ourselves.
Thank you. Representative Marshall, you have 1 minute if you'd like to give any clarifying remarks.
Yeah, certainly the Kansas economy overall is expanding, doing great by any metric. Unemployment under 3%. There are great jobs all across the state. Certainly rural agriculture continues to struggle. But the problem is we cannot keep doing what we've been doing. Agriculture's had the short end of the stick for over 20 years. China is slowly leaching, blood-sucking the life out of agriculture, as were other trade deals. Somebody had to stand up, and Donald Trump is the person that's chosen to quit kicking the can down the road, to stand up to all these short-term mini fixes that actually allows other countries to continue to have advantages over us. So we're going to keep rolling back regulations. We're going to try to, on the House side, we already made the individual taxes permanent, the small business tax cuts permanent as well. So certainly nationwide across the state, this economy is going stronger. I've got a lot of work to do on the agriculture economy, and that's why I'm focused on a strong farm bill and good trade deals.
Okay, thank you. Our third and final question for these candidates is about the political climate in Washington. Mr. LaPolice, you'll be given the first opportunity to respond to this question. The question is, given the current political climate in Washington, which we've already spoken about some tonight, how would you work for more productive conversations on the issues in our country and state?
It's everything to me. It's everything that I've been doing since I began in politics. I'm an educator and a farmer and a father. I'm very proud that my wife and my 3 daughters are here tonight. Politics isn't for me. Politics is what I'm doing to fix what I see as a torn apart nation. And when you were elected, you ran on this notion that partisanship was destroying this country, and you won the election. You won the primary, at least, by saying that you were going to reach across the aisle, down the aisle, in the aisle, you're going to be bipartisan. And then I applaud you on Valentine's Day. You gave a wonderful, touching speech about iron to iron and working together and being bipartisan. And yet you've done nothing to be bipartisan. Since you served in Congress, the divide has gotten farther, and you celebrate that divide. You claim that the Democrats are trying to ruin our nation. You claim that the Democrats sabotaged this Supreme Court nomination. You celebrate the divide. And if we don't deal with this divide, we are doomed. I don't want to be the naysayer, the doomsayer. I don't want to be downer here. But if we can't bridge this divide, then I don't know what the future of this country looks like, because we are supposed to be indivisible. Now, when I ran, and you'll say this is a weakness, and I see it as my greatest strength. When I ran against Congressman Huelskamp in 2014, this is what I preached, this is what I said. The divide is going to kill us. And I ran as a Republican, but a moderate Republican, and I nearly beat him. And that was unheard of back in 2014, to run as a moderate Republican. Didn't happen. And then I ran as an independent, because I said I have to be in the aisle if I'm going to actually do any good. And now you'll denounce me because I'm running as a Democrat. But when in fact I'm doing the only thing that I believe will solve this problem. I'm not talking the talk. I'm actually walking the walk. You see, I'm running this not for the Democratic Party. I apologize. I'm running this for the American people. So if anybody can be bipartisan, it's the person that will not give loyalty to a party, that will not swear off or swear to be partisan, but is willing to be bipartisan, or in my case, nonpartisan.
Thank you, Representative Marshall.
Yeah, maybe if I kind of shared my life, what my life is like in Washington, and just to think about, the chaos that you all see on TV is not my life at all. Every Tuesday night, I have a dinner with about 20 men, bipartisan, senators, congressmen, Republicans, Democrats, independents. We'd like to profess that we're men of God and that our faith is important to us, and we talk about our lives and our families. There are people that have lived in the bipartisan house that I lived in my first year, and I built great friendships with those men. Every Thursday morning, most every Thursday morning, I get to participate in a bipartisan prayer group. I've reached out to every member on the House Agriculture Committee that's a Democrat, went to their office and asked Jimmy Panetta from California, well, why is agriculture important to your district? And through this whole Farm Bill process, I've drawn upon those bipartisan relationships. If you come to Washington, D.C. and spend a week with me, you're going to see the freshman Democrats, ladies hug me, and you're going to see the freshman Democrat fist bump me. I don't have great relationships with all the Democrats, but I do several of them. Colin Peterson, the minority leader of the House Ag Committee, and I are good friends. Even invited me to go hunting with him this season as well. We both share that passion. I didn't go to Washington, D.C. with Republican on my shirt sleeve. I certainly believe in conservative philosophies. I'm proud to be a Republican and part of a Republican family. But I certainly do think that the divide is getting worse, and I think there's lots of reasons, and I'm trying to solve those reasons. But it all starts with relationships. One of my best times of the day, I go to the gym and work out most every afternoon between 3 and 5. Democrats are in the gym working out as well. We're building those types of relationships. So I'm doing it one person at a time. Very proud of my bipartisan relationships. Many times called upon by the House Ag Committee and leadership to reach out to my Democrat friends. So appreciate the comments.
Okay, thank you. Mr. LaPolice, 1 minute response if you have clarification at all.
The reality is, if you go and shadow any congressman right now, you'll find that 70% of their time is spent raising money for the next election. That's the truth. They spend over 70% of the time on the phone raising money for the next election. And they do not have to be bipartisan because it doesn't serve them in their reelection. In fact, to be partisan, to be hyper-partisan, guarantees you win your primary, and you can't get beat by somebody primarying you from the far left or the far right. That's what the new political world is. And that's what's got to change. I mean, everyone agrees that money has corrupted the system, and everyone agrees that partisanship is corrupting the system. And so to talk this talk, it sounds great, but the partisanship only grows worse, and I hear you on record. You were the man that said poor people don't want insurance because the Bible says so. You're the person that sabotaged the ACA with the ACA, and you never offered any other meaningful plan. You're the person that put us into catastrophic debt, and if you say you're a Republican, I'm going to denounce that, because we are in a boom economy with over $1 trillion deficit and no end in sight. So we have to fix it, and we're only going to fix it if we can come together as a nation and if leaders can just do their jobs.
Okay, thank you. As a close to this segment, each candidate is given 2 minutes for any final remarks, maybe issues or questions that weren't raised in the questions we provided. So if there's something you feel that you need to speak to, you'll be given 2 minutes to do that. And Mr. LaPolice, you're going to have the first opportunity to do that now.
I do want to end on an upbeat note. I have the greatest faith in you, the American people. I have the greatest faith in this nation surviving the darkest days. We've gone through terrible things. We've gone through global wars. We went through a civil war where we tore ourselves apart. We've seen dark days. And I hate to sound the alarm and say that we are currently back to dark days, but it's hard to deny it when every day on the news it's a new scandal, and every day on the news the politicians fight more viciously, and everything gets pulled so much further to the sides. Now, I'm offering you something different. I've been saying the same thing. I didn't necessarily want to run this third campaign, but I have children, and I believe in their future. I served in the Army. I fought for this country, and I fought as a nonpartisan. And I'm not going to let these crooked politicians who benefit from our divide, from our division, from our unkindness towards one another. So I'm going to fight like hell. I don't care for the political games that they play. I don't care for the fundraising that they do. I don't care for the names they call each other. All I care about is seeing that my kids grow up in a society that is better than the one that my father left for me. And I can't say it's going to be like that unless people like myself fight like hell, and people like all of you support that. Now, maybe out there, one of you also wants to run. Maybe one of these are the people that are going to solve the problems. But I'm up here, putting everything out there, offering to solve the problems. Everything I say to you is about solutions-based. It's not about how it's going to benefit me. It's not about how it's going to benefit one party. It's about how I believe I can bring this country back together. I'm a guy who believes in both sides. I see the benefit of having some good Republican ideology with some good Democratic ideology. But I'm the idealist who wants to save this country. And if you'll help me, maybe we can steer the country towards a better, brighter future for our kids. God bless you all.
Thank you. Representative Marshall, closing remarks.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate you coming out tonight, putting yourself out there, and just have respect for your efforts. This great big ship that we call the United States of America is slowly turning back in the right direction. After 8 years of almost drowning us in regulations and destroying our military, this beautiful country is finally going back in the right direction. It's just been incredible to see it come back alive in so many wonderful ways. I think about one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite things to do in Washington is to take people on a Capitol tour late at night. And on that tour, I typically stop in front of President Eisenhower's statue. And I kind of share about my relationship with Ike. When I was 10 years old, he passed away. My dad was part of the honor guard for the procession back here. And when I had my 10th birthday, my dad asked me what I wanted to do. I wanted to come see where Ike was buried. And it's just the thrill of my life to come back here and say I represent Ike's district here. But the story I share about Ike is that when President Eisenhower finished his presidency, the historian said, oh, he's probably like the 30th best president ever. And here we are 30, 40 years later, and most experts would say he's one of the top 5. And I would just caution people to judge a decision tonight that was made this morning, because sometimes decisions take a while to bear their fruit. And I think of what President Eisenhower did. He started the interstate highway system. He did the first civil rights legislation. He started the Health, Education, and Welfare Department. He started NASA. But it took decades for all those decisions to really come to fruition. So, like the position I am, whatever the issue is, I try to take in all the facts, look through all the problems through everybody's eyes, and I look for that win-win opportunity. I'm going to keep doing that. I'm so proud to represent this community and this district, and I'm looking forward to the better days ahead for this beautiful country. Thanks for coming tonight.
We would invite to the stage next. Thank you again, Mr. LaPolice and Representative Marshall. Our candidates who are with us tonight running for Lieutenant Governor, we have Mr. Wink Hartman and Mr. Lynn Rogers. If you guys would come to the stage. Mr. Hartman is running with his running mate for Governor, Chris Kobach, and Mr. Rogers is running with his running mate, Mr. Kelly. We'll be asking 3 to 4 questions of these after they give their introduction. So once again, my instruction is to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run with the running mate that you have in 1 minute. And we're going to begin with Mr. Rogers.
Thank you. It's good to be here. Appreciate the opportunity. It's good to see my colleagues from the Senate, Senator Hardy and Senator Wilborn. The 3 of us serve in the Senate, and I've been there for the last 2 years. I've also been a member of the Wichita School Board for 16.5 years, and had a career based in agriculture, banking, traveled all over the state of Kansas and worked with farmers and ranchers and their cooperatives. I selected working with Senator Kelly. I sit next to her in the Senate, which is a privilege. And I've been very impressed. When she was filing back in December, there really was only one person that I thought could help fix the problems that we've been in. As you realize, Kansas has really been in a world of hurt for the last 8 years. And our roads, our schools, our communities have been devastated, and we deserve better. And that's really the plan of Senator Kelly.
Thank you. Mr. Hartman.
Well, thank you very much for having me this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. My name is Wink Hartman. I am the only true, real business person in this race. I am not a politician. I'm a businessman. Born and educated, Wichita, Kansas, lived in Rose Hill for the last almost 30 years. Graduated Wichita State University. Since that time, I've been very fortunate in business. I am the chairman of a group of banks. I explore for oil in western Kansas and own Hartman Oil Company. Hopefully you've been to Hartman Arena, Jimmy's Egg, Chester's Chop House, H2 Trucking. The companies that I have created with after-tax money through taking risk is what I know best. I will be able to do the same things for all the people in Kansas, to put my arms around and build an economy we can all be proud of and share with our children and our grandchildren.
Thank you. We'll begin the questions with a fairly specific one. And Mr. Rogers, we will give you the opportunity to speak first to this one. Remember, with the response to questions, you have 2 minutes to speak, and then the person who spoke first will receive an additional 1 minute for clarifications. So the first question, which both will address, is how will you and your running mate plan to address the K-12 funding situation, given the Kansas Supreme Court's decision this past summer?
Well, I think we're well on our way to fixing the situation with the latest action that we took this year in the Senate and the House. We do have to fix a little bit more because the legislature the courts came in and said we still need to take care of cost of living. So we're well on our way. We could have had to have a lot more based on the study that the legislature started. Basically saying we could have to put $1 billion to $2 billion more in, and the courts accepted the $535 million that we put in, as long as we fix that. We still have a lot of work to do in the state because we've been damaged. The major cuts that we've had through the Brownback tax plan have devastated our schools. Teachers are finally getting a pay raise. We're finally able to start putting some programs back in place that meet the needs of our kids, and we're seeing investments in early childhood as well as our vocational programs. We need to do more. We need to make sure that we re-energize our teaching profession. And what I mean by that is that we respect them, we show them the honor that they deserve, encourage them to stay. Many are leaving the state because of the problems that we've had, as well as families that are leaving because they don't want their kids in Kansas schools. We're fixing all those. So we're well on our way to do the right thing. But one of the things that Senator Kelly wants to do is make sure that we use education as a major economic driver. It's important in every community. It's really what keeps your community together. When the school closes, your community closes. So we need to continue to build on that and work in that direction as well. There's also some specific things that we can do to help bring school boards, teachers groups, organizations that are interested in education together to start working forward to be even more efficient. That was one of the things that was exciting about the study that was made, was that schools were viewed as 97% efficient, and this was from outside experts. They had seen no other state that had that high of efficiency of how they use their money. So I think we're on a good starting point, but we need to continue to move our objective further so that our kids are educated for the next century.
Thank you. Mr. Hartman, how would you and your running mate plan to address the K-12 education funding situation, given the Kansas Supreme Court's decision this past summer?
Well, you mentioned the very word that is the very problem, the Kansas Supreme Court. The Kansas Supreme Court is holding every child hostage by the method by which they are creating, quote, adequate funding and/or additional funding for education. I can assure you there is plenty of funding, and Chris Kobach and Wink Hartman have never suggested or have desired to defund or reduce educational spending as we have been accused. There is plenty of money in K-12 education presently. The number one problem is the amount of monies that goes in the classroom in front of your children. Right now, 50 to 53 cents of every dollar goes into the classroom. Obviously, some school districts are more, some are less, but approximately 53 cents. Chris Kobach actually has a policy to help educate our children, to put 75 cents of every dollar, every educational dollar into the classroom. Maybe we can start teaching such things as cursive again so your children and grandchildren can learn how to write. We no longer teach that. Maybe we can interject SHOP, which is a part of vocational training, so a student can actually learn to use some skill called a hammer and a saw instead of a Game Boy. These are not imaginations. These are very serious problems in our schools. We need to put the funding of our schools back in your hands. Appropriations Committee, who you are the people that elect those people to appropriate the money, including the schools. We need a constitutional amendment to put the lawsuits once and for all to rest. Because they are not, ladies and gentlemen, they are not going to end next month, next year, or the year after, no matter how much money you throw at education. We have to have a concise policy to educate our children and distribute the money accordingly. That is the number one expense in the Kansas state budget. And the problem needs to be solved and solved now. Chris Kobach will do that.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, anything to redirect or clarify?
Well, I do think the lie that continues to be said about 53 cents in the classroom needs to be addressed. That is what the formula reads, but it's not how it works. If you look at the formula, there's a number of things that aren't counted in a classroom, and there are many things that are. But for instance, electricity is not counted as a classroom expense. Football coaches are. Librarians are not included, but other things are. And so you really, when you look at what is actually spent in a classroom or to benefit children, which includes, social workers, folks that will help psychiatrists and counselors, which again are not counted as one of the in-classroom expenses. When you do it and look at the things that are actually spent, it's almost 82 to 83 cents. And we spend less than 1% on central administration, and we do not have any schools that have 12 assistant principals. I think even the concept of 2 schools having 12 is also been debunked, and we continue to see those things are just myths that continue to be told.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is again about a fairly specific issue within the state of Kansas. We'll start with Mr. Hartman on this question. The question is, what is your position and the position of your running mate on Medicaid expansion in the state of Kansas?
Well, thank you for the question. That is by far a very, very hot topic, as we all know. The number one thing about Medicaid expansion, presently the way CanCare is being run and or developed, we are not in favor of expansion. We need to take, like a business, we need to put our arms and our hands on that subject, and we need to straighten it out and get it so it works the way it was designed to work. It does not work the way it was designed. Let's take an example, for instance, of the Fort Scott Hospital. Mercy Hospital is closing. December 31st, it's closing. 230 jobs are going to be lost. A city of 9,000 people are no longer going to have a hospital in their community. But we find out, if we look at the numbers very, very quickly, we blame it on Medicaid expansion. The hospital all of a sudden is closing. Well, that is not the fact. The fact is that hospital had about $30 million worth of revenue and about $13 million worth of expenses. When you go home, please Google that. I call that a profit. $10, $11 million left on the table that was not used to run that hospital. They had $2.5 million worth of uncollectible bills for services rendered. There's still a profit on the table, but yet the hospital's closing. Well, the hospital in Independence closed. I would suggest that poor management, the money was taken elsewhere out of the Fort Scott community and put into the Mercy system to pay other bills in other locations. A hospital running a positive cash flow should not have closed, just like Independence. So let's take our three umbrellas underneath CanCare, the insurance companies that provide the services to handle CanCare, and let's sharpen our pencil. Let's get the thing run properly for the elderly, for our children, for pregnant women. There's a lot of people that need their services, but we need to provide it properly in a timely manner before we think about expanding something that isn't working properly.
Thank you. Mr. Rogers, your response, 2 minutes.
Well, Medicaid expansion is a major economic driver for the state. We would be able to cover another 150,000 patients. Senator Kelly and myself both voted in favor of it. Also, the reason we did that was because it can be a plan that can be designed to fit the needs of Kansans. And I think it's very important to realize that rural hospitals are more likely to close in states that don't have Medicaid expansion than those that do. For instance, in our city, I was there recently, they provide $2 million of uncompensated care. Medicaid expansion would cover about $1.2 million of that, so it doesn't cover the entire amount. But what's interesting is that the city there, the residents tax themselves to the tune of about $1.5 million on their property tax in order to pay for their local hospital. Wichita hospitals have over $70 million each of uncompensated care. And recently we spent several $1 million in the state to save 600 Cargill jobs, meat packing or meat processing plant jobs. I'm sorry, not plant, office jobs in Wichita, 600 that make approximately $40,000 to $60,000. A very important employer in Wichita, very positive for our economy. But during that same period of time, we lost 600 to 800 jobs in Via Christi because of those uncompensated care. And so that is a huge cost. Those states that have done Medicaid expansion have created jobs throughout their entire state. They have also generated additional income, and most of the hospitals are in favor, partly because the extra cost is going to have to be borne on their shoulders. And so we do have a lot of work to do it, but we can fix the Medicaid expansion and cover many more of our Kansas residents. It won't solve all of the uninsured residents of the state, but it is something that is really important to provide quality health care in all of our counties. And I think the question you have to ask of both candidates is, which local hospital are you okay closing? If you close the hospital in Fort Scott, yes, maybe it's 30 miles to get there, but when Fort Scott closes, how far is the next one? 90 miles? 120 miles? And who can do that when they're having a heart attack?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hartman, 1 minute for follow-up if you have anything to clarify or add to.
Well, I just have one very, very short comment on that. We always want to take and dangle that carrot of Medicaid in front of all ills. Well, I can assure you that is very, very incorrect. The hospitals are not closing because of the lack of. Mr. Rogers just pointed out to you very, very clearly that they did not have their hands on how to do all of the plans and how to bring all the facilities to the people. So is that something we're going to dream out for $200 or $300 million of your tax money more? Don't forget, federal tax money is your money too. Comes out of your billfold too. The panacea of medical care on every corner is not expansion of Medicaid. We could go to concierge medicine. It works. It works very, very clearly. It works in Wichita very, very clearly. So there's a lot of other alleys that we can go down other than spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars and getting the same poor results as we're getting now out of CanCare.
Okay, thank you. Our third and final general question before closing remarks is more maybe philosophical about government. And we're going to begin with Mr. Rogers on this one. Question is, what is your view of the role of government in the state of Kansas?
Well, I think there's some key elements that the state is required to provide, and there are things that we can do better when we do them together. Roads, schools, various services, and then there's also safety issues, you know, our state patrol and Kansas Bureau of Investigation, some of those kinds of things. And so our philosophy is that we can provide those together at a lower cost. We need to be as efficient as we possibly can, and we want to make sure that it is provided equally and fairly to all Kansans. Unfortunately, again, because of the Brownback tax plan, many of those things have been cut from rural Kansas more than they have even from the urban areas that I represent. So we need to be fair to all Kansans and make sure that we're working hard for that. Senator Kelly, we feel like with the overturn of the Brownback tax plan, we need to absorb that revenue that we're getting and use it for the priorities that the legislature feels they need to do. What do we want to invest in? Where do we want to go? And there's no need or desire right now to do additional taxes. We do feel like there needs to be relief on the property tax situation. You know, the cap and some of the things that are suggested by our opponent, I don't believe are constitutional. They've been looked at multiple times by the legislature and have said that they won't work for both local and the state level. And so we need to be practical. We need to be honest with our citizens. We need to be aware of what's going on and keeping people informed. One of the #1 complaints I hear as I travel, and we've done about 18,000 miles so far since I've joined the campaign, is that people don't feel listened to. And Kansans, no matter where they're located, have not been heard by our legislator or by our state government, by our governor for quite a long time. And so we need to do a better job of listening as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hartman, same question for 2 minutes. What is your view and that of your running mate of the role of government in the state of Kansas?
Well, the role of government is much like I've been very successful in business. It is called leadership, strong leadership with an open mind and the ability to judge what is good and what is bad for the people of Kansas. I've made a living at a conference table. I've always been able to put people at a conference table. I say, put your shoe under my conference table, we'll have a cup of coffee, and we'll discuss the issue that needs to be discussed, be it ag, be it DCF and the missing children and the children being killed, be it Capers that is underfunded. These are issues that are going to have to be dealt with. Education we've talked about, a major, major issue for this state to be successful and move forward. If you have a strong lieutenant governor who understands business, understands how to balance the budget, understands how to take and prosper an economy by creating jobs and bringing more companies to our state, you're looking at the candidate, and the only candidate in this race who can do it. I am the only one. I have over 50 years experience in doing what I'm speaking of. And I have a track record behind me to prove that I've done it. Let's take the problems we have now. We have a 6.5% sales tax. That is ludicrous. It is one of the largest in the United States. We are the high tax state in our peer group. How are we going to compete for companies to come to Kansas, create more jobs, when we continue to see more and more property tax hikes, income tax hikes, more taxes on your billfold? That type of leadership will fail in Topeka. You need somebody that knows how to cut expenses where needed, but preserve the services that you deserve, and you can restructure the taxes at a lower level than they are today. Everybody yells and screams and sets their hair on fire. Well, Kobach's going to take and reduce taxes. Yes, but you have to also take and reduce spending and put the money where it is best for the people of Kansas. And you can balance the budget, and you can get it done.
Mr. Rogers, you have 1 minute to clarify anything to add to that.
Well, I think one thing, I think you need to ask specifically, what will you cut from this other candidate? If you remember in the 2012 tax cut, the legislature was totally controlled by the far right. They had a veto-proof House and a veto-proof Senate, and yet even during that time, they could not cut the things to match the income tax cuts. Because many of those services are things that you and I use each and every day. Now, we've taken money out of every different fund that we can think of. We've even borrowed almost $400 million for road maintenance, and we're paying interest on that. So those are the things that can be cut and become more efficient, but it is doing government wisely, not just willy-nilly cuts that are going to be dangerous to your safety and to your communities.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 minutes for each candidate. To make any final closing remarks, again, about maybe issues that weren't brought up in the questions that you feel it's important to address in front of this audience. So we're going to begin with Mr. Hartman. You have 2 minutes to share anything you want to add to your comments that you've made previously.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate such a large crowd coming out to at least listen to the concepts of the two of us. I think it's very, very important. That's what governing is all about. It's not about Democrat and Republican, although it happens to be that position tonight. It's about leadership. It is about having the wisdom to put the right people at the table, have the understanding how you take and make policy that is good for all and not for the few. I assure you, I can and will do that for the state of Kansas. We have to take and reduce our spending. That doesn't mean we cut out needed services. That doesn't mean we butcher every single department. We have to wisely go through and figure out where we can take and save money, just like I do in my business and you do in your business or at your kitchen table when you pay your bills. You do not have enough money to arm wave every program that you see, like some people in this campaign wish to do so. It will not work. It will fail. DCF needs to be restructured. Capers, if you want to have good state employees, I have a 401k program for all of my hundreds and hundreds of employees. I match 100%. Well, if you want to have good employees in the state of Kansas and can keep those employees, we better get back on board with Capers, and we better get it funded, and we better get it moving quickly. The Department of Revenue, we need to collect the bills that are due and are fairly owed. Department of Transportation, they're bonding repairs to our roads. 20-year bonds for a 7-year road. World I grew up in, the business world that I know, that is 100% foolishness. Why that ever got started, I don't know. But we need to correct those ills. Conservative Chris Gobach and conservative Wink Hartman will listen, will share ideas with all people at all times, and will lead the state forward to a better economy for your children and your grandchildren.
2 minutes.
Actually, Wink, I think it's 40-year bonds. So there has been a lot of mismanagement over the last 8 years. Did you know that the Kansas Bureau of Investigation no longer investigates crime for any white-collar crime, any 14% of the rapes in the state, and any child crime they don't investigate unless the child's been abducted, sexually abused, and murdered, because they don't have the resources for it. Our state has been emptied out. We've been devastated through agencies and through the tax cuts of Sam Brownback. We need to do better, and our Kansas residents need to do better. One of the things that you'll see with Senator Kelly is that she can work across the aisle. There is a group of moderate Republicans and Democrats that have worked together, and over the years, they've done things for the Kansas economy that's kept us moving in the right direction. Laura has been endorsed by Bill Graves, Nancy Kassebaum, 3 of the former Senate presidents, and 27 to 30 other Republicans around the state. They know that she can work together across the aisle on a regular basis, and that's what's really important. When we go to Kansas and go to Topeka in January, we may run as Republicans and we may run as Democrats, but when we're there in January, we need to be Kansans. Most of the committees that I serve on, we serve on as Kansans. We don't talk about it as a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. That's what we need to get back to. We need to do the right thing for Kansas so that our children have a future, that there's an opportunity. One of the things we haven't talked about is out migration. 85,000 Kansans have left our state in the last few years. That's a much bigger issue than immigration, because those 85,000, when they're gone, they don't come back. And there are jobs for them, but they're not really the quality jobs or the quality life that they want. So we do need to do better. And I think with Senator Kelly on November 6th, you'll see that. She has the ability to bring people together. She's a no-nonsense, common sense problem solver that will work for each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rogers and Mr. Hartman. We appreciate you being here to represent the candidates. Our next segment is for the candidacy of the Kansas Secretary of State. As Allison mentioned earlier, Mr. Schwab could not be here this evening due to final conflicts that came up in his schedule. So we have Mr. Hodgkinson, who is running for that position, with us here tonight. So this will be a little bit shorter segment, and I do want to make sure I mention that the questions...
You have it shorter. You had this much time set up. Let me have it all.
The questions that we will ask Mr. Hodgkinson are the same questions we had written for both candidates. We have not made any adjustments to that schedule. So, as we have before, Mr. Hodgkinson, if you have 1 minute to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run for this position.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me. I apologize for my two opponents not showing up, but I kind of like having yelled myself. I'm Rob Hodgkinson. I'm a candidate for Kansas Secretary of State. You may remember me. I ran in the past back in 2006, so this is not my first rodeo. You'll know that there's a Republican in this race, there's a Democrat in this race, and then there's me. I'm the alternative candidate in this race. I'm running because I believe I have the best, most well-rounded resume of the three candidates running today. There's three areas that I have that neither of the two, the Republican and the Democrat in my race, have. One of those is IT experience. I was responsible for a company's entire enterprise. I built the servers, I built the desktops. I helped the CEO, I helped the people in the plant, and everybody in between. I'm a small businessman today. I do real estate, I've owned residential remodeling companies, and then the third thing, elections. I've been fighting for fair and safe elections for 15 years from a third-party outsider perspective. Neither of my opponents has all three areas under their resume. I do.
Thank you. Okay, the first question is that the current Secretary of State has made voter identification a primary focus. Would that continue to be a major focus for you, and why or why not?
Yes and no. This is a good question. I actually, when I was stopped to get gas today, when I got to here to Abilene, the people that were pumping gas next to me brought that very question up. Voter ID, if you look at the back of my credit cards, it says ask for voter ID. You know, ask for a picture ID, okay? I believe that the poll people working aren't gonna know everybody. Now out here in rural Kansas, I understand it's different than it is where I live up in the Kansas City area. The people up there, there's no way they know everybody they can walk up. A picture ID is a really good idea when you're coming in to vote so that they know who that person is. The challenge with this is if you, down here, you guys, it's a little easier to get your driver's license or an ID. In Johnson County, you can't get it. They're trying to open a third office in Johnson County just to get driver's license and stuff. If the elderly, the people that have handicaps can't sit in line for hours and hours to try to get an ID. So if we're gonna have picture IDs as a requirement, we've got to find a better way to get those IDs to people.
Okay, thank you. Second question, since there's no time or reason for rebuttal.
Second question, everybody wants to hear me talk. Let's go.
The second question is about small businesses. You've mentioned that. It can be difficult right now for new business owners to navigate the processes necessary to ensure that their new business is in compliance with all the state regulations. How would you, as Secretary of State, plan to streamline that process for business owners?
Well, to be blunt, and as an IT guy, I can probably say it this way, but the website sucks. Okay, and as a small businessman myself, I had to do the reporting for my businesses to do that side. So I've been on the customer side of this issue. I understand it completely. The website, both from a business filing standpoint and from the elections side, is needing major updates. Everything today, if you're 35 and under, and I'm not sure there's anybody in here that's under 35,
hey.
but if you're 35 and under, this is how you do it. Okay, everybody, this is how they do it. The website, as it stands today, is not mobile friendly whatsoever. we have got some major updates that we need to do in that regard, and that's where my IT experience comes in really handy. I've had to build those servers. I understand what we need to make those streamlined filings work. And election side of it, for that matter. I was actually at the state fair. The booth, my booth, the Libertarian booth, was across from the Secretary of State's booth. They actually came over and said, well, we're doing an update in January. We're going to have this new website come out in January. I said, really? I said, what are you doing? He said, well, what would you want to see? And I went, well, do you really want to ask that question? So, I told him, I said, we've got to make the websites better. They have to be mobile friendly. The navigation just stinks. To try to find anything on the websites, it's just terrible. And so those things need to change dramatically so that people can find the information they want, both on the business side and the election side. The Green Party called me to get the information on how to run to become a party in Kansas again. And they're going to take a shot in 2020. But they had to call me to find out because I'm the expert in the major minor party goofy laws we have today.
Okay. Our third and final question for Secretary of State candidate Hodgkinson is about what you feel is the most important role for the Secretary of State in Kansas. What is the most important role for this position?
Well, one, bring the credibility back. Thanks to the lawsuits and the constant losing court battles, we've lost our credibility in the state for elections. It's time to bring that back. We have got to bring that back. And part of that is going to be, and I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit on issues, but cross-check has to go. Cross-check has to be eliminated. That program is faulty. It's got to go. Another thing I would like to see in the office is the 4 big counties in this state have election commissioners that are appointed by our Secretary of State. Half the voters in this state are affected by those 4. They should be locally elected, not appointed. They shouldn't be cronies of the Secretary of State. I'm going to lobby to make that change. We need those changes in that office. We need the special election law, you may remember in 2017, was changed when Pompeo bailed on Kansas. We had to change the special election law because they weren't going to let any third parties in. And then for independents, it was a major undertaking to get the signatures that they needed. Thanks to me, I was the catalyst. That law changed. Now any recognized political party, whether we're a major party or minor party, can be in a special election, and we lowered the signature requirements for independents dramatically so that we can have more candidates in our elections. I truly believe that more candidates is the best way to go. I love the fact we have 5 candidates for governor. I love it. Because what happens then is you get candidates talking about issues, not just throwing mud at each other. We get to talk about the issues that are important, so when our governor is elected, they truly know what you want. I love the fact that we have 5 candidates, and I wish we had that all the way down through the ballot.
Okay, thank you. As with other candidates for other positions, we'll give you 2 minutes to make any final remarks. If there are any issues you feel are important that haven't been addressed in these questions, you feel it's important to communicate to these voters, please do.
Well, a little background on me. Again, you guys might remember me from 2006 when I ran. I'm a 5th generation Kansan. I was born in Pratt. I was raised outside of Hodgkinson, Bueller High School. Went to K-State, majored in electrical engineering technology. I'm a father of 3, grandfather of 7. I have 2 fur babies, both rescues. They love sleeping in my bed with me. I've been doing elections for a long time, like I say, from a third-party outsider perspective, trying to make things better for Kansans in general. I'm going to keep doing that. Please help by voting for Rob Hodgkinson, the alternative candidate. I'm not the R, I'm not the D. Okay? So when you see the ballot, forget those 2 letters. Thank you for having me tonight, and I'll be here at the end, so if you have any specific questions from the Secretary of State's viewpoint, please corner me and ask those questions. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Hodgkinson. Appreciate you being here. Next, we will have candidates for the Kansas House of Representatives 70th District, which includes, who I'll invite to the stage right now, Representative John Barker and Mrs. Jo Schwartz.
Not that old. How you doing?
And as with other candidates, we will give you each 1 minute to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've chosen to run for this position. Mrs. Schwartz, we'll start with you.
Well, good evening. Hi, I am Jo Schwartz, and I want to be your next state representative for the 70th District. Simply put, I am a wife, mother, grandmother, friend, and neighbor who cares. I care that our children receive the best possible education because their future jobs depend on it. I care that every Kansan has access to quality and affordable health care, and I listen when those people tell me what it is they want in care, and I listen to the hospitals, both large and small, when they said what the effects of not expanding Medicaid has cost them. So I do want to thank the Chamber for inviting us here tonight and the Eisenhower Visitor Center for hosting us. And I don't know about you, but I'd like to just get on to the questions.
Thank you. Am I on? All right. First up, my name is John Barker. I am presently your representative. I'm running for my 4th term. And Tim, you're doing a very good job reading the questions.
Thank you.
I live in Abilene. I'm married to April forever. We raised 2 children in the Abilene area. My son graduated in '93, and my daughter, I think it was in 2008. I met April many years ago when I was in the United States Army. I served 10 plus years in the United States Army. Met her. We decided to get out and we came to Kansas. I served worked with the county attorney's office for a number of years, and then in the sheriff's department, and then I became judge in 1987, served until 2012, and the reason I'm in the legislature is my daughter came home from college and said, Dad, you need to run for the legislature, you need something to do. So I ran, she helped me get elected, and it's been very good for the last 6 years. I'm part of the management or the leadership team. I've served as chairman of the judiciary. I presently serve as the chairman of Fed and State, but it's just, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad the Chamber has invited us all down, and let's get to the questions.
Let's do. Our first question, Representative Barker, you'll have the first chance to answer this. Remember, you get 2 minutes, and whoever answers first will have an additional 1 minute at the end to clarify. So the first question is, this past summer, the Supreme Court ruled that K-12 education funding in the state of Kansas remains inadequate. How would you address that?
Well, one, they did rule it was inadequate. We've been in litigation on school finance for 35 years. It's been going on forever. It started out with the Gannon and Montoya cases over one word, suitable. But as Senator Rogers indicated, we met that burden this year when we voted to put $522 million in education over a period of years. The Supreme Court said we need to address the inflationary factor. And they also addressed on the equity, which is the second part of the lawsuit. And they said, we have met that condition because there are certain things that we're doing with the LOBs. So I think this year we're obliged to go back and fix the inflationary factor. But initially they wanted $1 billion. And we worked it where we put in 522. Supreme Court agreed that you've met the essence of the decision. However, you need to address the inflationary factor.
Okay. right, Mrs. Schwartz, same question. How would you address the Supreme Court's ruling that K-12 education funding was inadequate?
Well, I would not spend another nickel on a cost study. I think that we, the taxpayers, have paid enough over the last several years of people trying to do study after study. This last session, they did hire Dr. Lori Taylor from Texas A&M University. And so everything was put on hold while they waited for her results. Now, imagine their surprise when that report came back that not only was school overwhelmingly underfunded, but they were almost 96% efficient. And I think that's a pretty high number. I do like to point out that my opponent has a voting record for education that's only 12%. So I would not like to use any other figures. This is the latest report. Let's go with it. No more delays. No more blaming the Supreme Court. No more trying to change the Constitution just so you can shortchange education. Now, currently, the excess cost of special ed is funded at 78%. And the law actually says it must be at 92%. So where is the extra money coming from? Well, we take it from our local general fund. So if we start funding education appropriately, we can take the dollars that we have spent there and put it into the classroom for the teachers and the kids. And today, the base state aid per pupil is $250 less than in 2008. So we're really not at a fact that where we need to be. We also need to put more funds into the younger kids. It is a known fact that the pre-kindergarten ages need that extra help. We also can look at colleges. They cut the funding for colleges, so now they had to raise tuition. Who cannot afford to go to school? It's the low and middle income people that are hurting.
Thank you. Representative Barker, 1 minute if you'd like to clarify anything.
Thank you. Well, one, we're the legislature that did all-day kindergarten. Before it was half-day kindergarten. Now we have full-day kindergarten. And we're spending about over $13,000 on every student to include the children in kindergarten. So, and just remember, this lawsuit was filed in November of 2010. And if you look at the factual basis on the second page of the Supreme Court decision, it's based upon the cuts in funding for schools in 2008 and 2009. That's when Sebelius and Parkinson were the governors. In 2010 is when Brownback was elected. So the whole lawsuit was based upon a 2008 and 2009 lawsuit where the actual cutting of the state-based aid took place. It's in the report. I would welcome you to go to the Supreme Court website. And as far as talking about the Supreme Court, you know, they're friends of mine. I recently had breakfast with them, and Chief Justice came out to Abilene on his way to Dodge City, and we stopped and had breakfast at the old Abilene town. So you've never heard me call out the Supreme Court. I differ with their opinions, but they are good people.
Thank you. Moving on to another pretty specific topic and question that a lot of people have been asking about, and that has been mentioned some tonight by some of the other candidates on stage. And Mrs. Schwartz, we'll start with you on this question. What is your stance on Medicaid expansion and why?
I think that we have done a disservice to the people of Kansas by not having expanded already. We have been paying our taxes to the federal government, and we have over $2 billion that have been left laying on the table. This is other states are collecting that money. So yes, I don't like my money to go unused. And I attended the Capitol. They had the testimonies there of people, individuals like you, that went there to say why they wanted to expand. Sharing personal stories. Doctors got up in front and said why they wanted to expand. Hospitals got up and said why they wanted to expand. I was so excited to be a part of that because the entire Capitol was filled with people like yourselves who came to say, we need to expand Medicaid. So I went to our current representative afterwards and I said, after hearing all this, how are you going to vote? And he said, I don't know, I need to confer with some people. We don't need people like that at Topeka. We need people who will listen to you and then vote that way. And on House Bill 2365, Barker did vote no. So earlier they did talk about Mercy Hospital closing. And yes, there were like 200 people that now don't have a job. And that makes me think, what do we do here in Abilene if our hospital should close? That's going to hurt our businesses. That's going to hurt our schools. I think it is also important that we send someone who will fight for people with pre-existing conditions. That's our big scare, is that some insurance is going to come along and take that away from us. Also, I see my time is almost out, so I'll just throw in, again, someone who will go and fight with the pharmaceutical companies, that we need to keep those costs down. When you're on a fixed income, you cannot have these skyrocketing.
Okay, thank you. Representative Barker, same question. What is your position on Medicaid expansion and why?
Thank you. Let's first talk about what Medicaid expansion is. Medicaid expansion will now cover a group of folks that have never been covered before. There's projected of 150 to 150,000 Kansans, and they're able-bodied, they're capable of working, and are not working, and they would get free insurance. And not only do they get the insurance, they get the Cadillac plan because they don't have any co-pays. Medicare, you have co-pays. If you have Blue Cross and Blue Shield, you have co-pays. It's just giving individuals, 26-year-olds that are sitting on their mom's couch, not doing anything, free insurance. Well, they have an option. They can actually go to work somewhere and work 30 hours a week, apply for a grant and get a grant under the ACA and get hospitalization. Now, the other part about it, and I don't like, is because we have physically disabled people and we have intellectually disabled, and they have a waiting list. These folks on Medicaid expansion would go in front of the line. It's projected that 160 people in Kansas could be as many. Every state that's made those projections have missed it. In Colorado, it was 320% over what they had projected. Every other state, the only state that kind of hit it on the nail was Hawaii. So if we're talking about $50 million or $10 million a year for Medicaid expansion, then quadruple that. And it could be 4 times that. We don't know what the population will be. And I find it interesting because this is a hospital association, one of their primary things, but yet the hospital association supports me, the Kansas Hospital Association, because they know I'm reasonable. You know, I wanted a work component. Kentucky tried a work component, and it's in litigation right now. So there are other options. But Medicaid expansion, and the federal government presently pays 90-10. On regular Medicaid, it's 45-55. Federal government 2 years ago looked at changing the Medicaid expansion from 90 to 10 to the regular Medicaid expansion, 45-35. Then it quadruples again. So most states that have expanded it have problems with their budget. Ohio's $3.4 billion in the red.
Thank you, Mrs. Schwartz, 1 minute if you'd like to clarify anything from that.
About the only thing I would like to throw in is the fact that the Hospital Association supports him because they always support the incumbent. I have talked with the Hospital Association myself one-on-one, and they wish they had people like me in there with them. So again, sometimes when you're getting endorsed, it's because they just simply do the incumbent. That's all.
Thank you. Our final regular question for the House of Representatives candidates has to do with the economy. And Representative Barker, you'll have the first opportunity to answer this question. The question is, with the economy currently looking stronger and the legislative tax increase in Kansas in 2017, what changes would you like to see in order to strengthen the state's fiscal health going forward?
Good. And you know, we're so fortunate the last 2 years. The economy's booming. You've got 401ks. I'm looking forward to next week. I'm going to speak. I'm on the Joint Committee on Capers. We got $16 million invested in our Capers Trust Fund. I want to see how much it is. Usually it's the biggest contributor to our unfunded actuarial. But as far as the economy itself goes, you know, the farm economy is not doing as well. I know, I'm a farmer. You know, my wheat this year just didn't make it. I'm hoping my beans will. With this water, I'm not real sure. It may be January before I can get in the field and harvest it. But the things I would like to see is we have the highest sales tax in all of surrounding states. We also have the highest income tax in all of surrounding states. But if we have, and as of September, we have $80 million surplus. Our revenues are up $80 million. You know, one of the things that I talked about is trying to cut food tax. Food tax will affect everybody. Cut the sales tax on foods. Also, some of the other things is, and I think one of the colleagues brought it up earlier, about the KBI. You know, law enforcement and also the Kansas firefighters support me also. I've always tried to work with the first responders, the folks that's going to come to your house and hopefully get you restarted if your heart starts. But the firefighters have done a lot. I worked the last few years on getting additional funding for state troopers. We were down state troopers. We had the smallest classes. We got a pay raise for them. They had the largest class after that. So I worked with the troopers. I worked with the KBI director on getting additional funding. One of the projects that I'm looking at this year, and when the chief came out to visit with us, is I'm trying to work on a plan to get our judges a salary increase. We are number 50 in the nation on judges. When I was a judge, we were 37. So the chief came out, and I'm working with a plan to try to increase the judicial branch budget.
Thank you. Mr. Schwartz, same question. With the economy looking stronger and the legislative tax increase in Kansas in 2017, what changes would you like to see to strengthen the state's fiscal health going forward?
Well, I would continue to reverse the damages caused by the Brownback administration, of which my opponent was a staunch supporter of. And in fact, in the last 3 votes to try to overturn that experiment, he was absent for 2 of them and voted no on the 3rd one. So I believe locally we can help, especially like supporting our greyhound farmers and not some billionaire. I believe that we need to start putting money back into the programs we cut, and because I have talked to local people by the highway funds that were cut, they said, I had 30 jobs lined up, and now with those cuts, I only had 2. So how am I supposed to feed my family and pay the rent when we have that kind of situation? I think that I attended the Governor's Ag Summit. Did you ever go to those? There were 3 of them over in Manhattan. And this is where businesses and farmers and ranchers came together. Anyone who had an interest in growing Kansas. What they said there, to shorten this down, was we need to use what we already have. And we have lots of meat byproduct, and we have grain. So when you put those 2 together, that makes pet food. We already have had several companies who have been successful in making a really good product, enough so that the big companies came in and bought them. So that's one thing that's good. Another thing we have is a lot of land. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I get tired of seeing those plastic bags hanging off the fences that are caught up in the trees. They do not degrade, you know, they're there for life. But we can be planting industrial hemp, and one of the byproducts of that is a biodegradable bag. Wouldn't it be great if we led in our new businesses something as awesome as the grocery bags? Thank you.
Representative Markey, 1 minute if you have any clarifying remarks.
I voted for the hemp bill last year, but more importantly, you know, I was at the livestock sale yesterday over in Salina, you know, and cattle prices are pretty stagnant. They're not going down, but they're pretty stagnant. Our farm economy with this rain, I'm not sure when we'll get into the fields, but she goes to agricultural conferences. I'm endorsed by Farm Bureau and the Kansas Livestock Association and the Feed and Grain. And why is that? It's because I know agriculture. I visit with them all the time. You know, I go to the co-ops, but I also visit with it at the state level. Our Department of Agriculture, of course, is over in Manhattan, Kansas now. So anytime that they've got some new proposal, they, as a legislator, they contact me and I go out and look at it or read over it and give them my 2 cents worth. They don't always follow my advice, folks, but I wish they did. But it's one of those things that we do, and that's the reason I get endorsed by those associations, because I know agriculture.
Thank you. Okay, we are at the close of this, so again, 2 minutes for either of you. If you have any other issues that the questions didn't raise that you feel it's important to communicate to voters, we're going to begin with Representative Barker, 2 minutes. Anything else that you'd like to add?
It's hard for me to say anything in 2 minutes. When I go to the floor of the House, I know a few more minutes than that, but she's watching me, so I'm okay. I just thank you for coming out tonight. I mean, both sides of the aisle. It's been a good experience for everybody. I think I was glad to see Dr. Marshall get here. But you know, I have been in the House now 6 years. I've always been part of the leadership since my second year when I became vice chair of the committee. I enjoy the work, but this is more partisan than it is in Topeka most of the time. Most of our votes are 120 to 0 or 119. Some of my best friends are Democrats, and we go out to dinner, and I'm sure I probably had dinner with the minority leader, Jim Ward, more times than my opponent. And we fight on the floor. And we do things that are good for the state of Kansas. And we differ on a few issues. You know, I'm just a basic candidate that says, I will go there. I will work for the people of the 70th District. I've worked for the Eisenhower Foundation. I've got the license plate. I'm getting a tax credit, trying to get a tax credit for them last year. Dixon County called me. They wanted to continue the 2 mills on the roads that they have. I took a bill into a committee. Well, it was a little late to introduce the bill, so I took an amendment into transportation, got it on, carried it on the floor of the House. It passed. It died in conference. The school officials, every Friday I would come out and visit with Denise Guy, our old superintendent. On my way home, I used to joke that I would see her before I'd see my wife. Of course, I stopped off in Chapman and did a TV show, Legislative Update with John Barker, which is on Eagle Communication, because I like to communicate with the constituents. I'm the easiest guy to get a hold with. You can send me an email, but I'll probably respond. Call me. Here's my number. Everybody knows my number. It's on all my shows. It's on all my handouts. I would rather have a conversation than an exchange of 15 emails trying to get certain points. A conversation usually takes care of that. But again, thanks to the Chamber for letting us come out tonight, and I've enjoyed it. And I think now I'm going to take my wife to dinner.
Mrs. Schwartz, same for you. 2 minutes if there are any issues you want to address before we close.
Okay, well, you have heard where I stand on the issues, and now the ball is in your court. Do you keep sending back the same person who you know is not going to make any different changes in the way they vote? And do you send back the same person who most of my people know does not reply to emails or contacts? I want to be in Topeka to represent all of you. I have spent the last 3 years going around talking individually, door to door, town to town, and that's why I want to represent you. I've been listening. And from those, I don't know if they can zoom in on this, but I've taken surveys for 3 years, not after the session ended. I did it now, and there are 10 core issues that everyone agreed are important. Don't let us be divided by a single issue. We need to keep together. These are the issues that I will fight for in Topeka. Please remember that when you go to vote, and let that vote be for Joe Schwartz.
Thank you to our candidates for the Kansas House of Representatives, 7th District. We appreciate you being here. more people are probably familiar with you gentlemen. But tell us a little about yourself and why you've chosen to run in this position. You'll each get 1 minute for that. Mr. Roller, we're going to start with you.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank the senators, congressmen, representatives, and clergy that are here, and also the patrons of this district of Dickinson County. Thank you. The reason I'm here, I'm a citizen of Woodbine, Kansas, of this district, and I cared a lot about what's going on now, and what will happen in the future. And so I took an active part of being the first one to register, not being even familiar with this kind of position, to say, hey, I'm going to step up and we're going to do it this time. So that's the deal.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindahl, tell us a little about yourself and why you've chosen to run.
Sure, I'm Doug Lindahl. I live with my wife Marlene on the family farm east of Enterprise, started by my great-grandfather in 1860. I'm a private self-employed vocational rehabilitation counselor, works with attorneys, injured individuals, insurance companies, and Social Security judges. I graduated from Chapman High School, got a bachelor's degree in economics from Kansas State University, and a master's degree in counseling from Southwest Missouri State. We have 2 daughters who live in Kansas City. I'm proud of my 20-year involvement with Leadership Dickinson County, the Kansas Health Foundation, and the Kansas Leadership Center. Through that involvement, I've learned several valuable things, 2 of which are, number 1, in order to change the status quo, you have to turn up the heat, but not too far or you get into chaos. And number 2, everyone has gifts and talents and is part of the solution to issues. The best solutions come from working together. And I'm extremely pleased that my wife and Ron's wife are sitting together.
All right, thank you. I think you're muted there. We want to hear all about it. Okay, we're going to get with the questions here. The first question is a little bit economically directed, and Mr. Lindahl, we'll start with you on this one. 2 minutes. How do you envision or see the County Commission working with the Dickinson County Economic Development Corporation or others on economic development in the county?
Well, I'm really excited about working with Chuck Scott on economic development projects. As a vocational rehabilitation counselor, I've encouraged my clients to emphasize their positive qualities and not their disabilities. I describe myself as a positive attitude salesman. This is the same enthusiasm I've utilized in Leadership Dickinson County classes. I want to help in this effort, but I'm willing to take direction so that all efforts go in the same direction. I'm also concerned that all projects be thoroughly reviewed. I don't want to encourage projects that would directly compete with existing businesses. In thinking of the expansion of wind turbines in southern Dickinson County, for example, I try to ensure that roads are maintained so we don't all subsidize the projects so that some landowners benefit. I'm pleased that our high schools are emphasizing welding since we're at near full employment, so trained individuals for good jobs is critical. We are strategically located, so having an adequate workforce and housing for it will need to be emphasized. Our proximity to Fort Riley also gives us opportunities to recruit retiring military and utilize their training funds. So the possibilities are unlimited, and by emphasizing economic development, we can maintain critical services while not increasing mill levies.
Thank you. Mr. Roller, same question. How do you see the County Commission working with the Dickinson County Economic Development Corporation or others on economic development in the county?
Good question. Economic development, I have to applaud the Economic Development Council for the amount of money and funds they've raised recently to work with the County Commission. Economic development isn't necessarily always running out and spending money that you don't have. A good example of that is a small town of Woodbine, Kansas, as I was mayor a number of years ago, was highly indebted. We concentrated on infrastructure of the facility and maintaining and developing what we had within the system. Today, the little town of Woodbine, Kansas is debt-free. That's a privilege to these young folks coming up to give them an opportunity to advance and develop their communities. Abilene has a wide variety of opportunities because of the corridor of Interstate 70 and the surrounding areas. I'm representing the strong area of the south part of Dickinson County that wants to be so much involved with what you do. They have buildings that are available to be rented. They have land to be developed. They have opportunity with schools for teachers, workers, but we just need to work together from both ends of this community to put it together to make Dickinson County a strong community.
Thank you. Mr. Lindahl, you're allowed 1 minute if there's anything you want to clarify or address from that.
I'll just echo his comment on working together. That's how things get done.
All right. Our next question deals with the recent passing of the construction project at the county courthouse. Question is, what is your position or your take on the recent passing of the bond issue on the courthouse renovation and jail construction? Just generally your thoughts on that process. And we'll start with you, Mr. Roller.
Thank you for the question. I think it's a gut-wrenching situation in which we spend $15 million. That's a sizable amount of money. It's passed and we need to move forward. We need to observe what we're doing with that courthouse, watch our expenditures on it, keep within budget guidelines, and develop that. Things have changed in our communities. We all know that. It's not a free community anymore. We have a lot of crime. We have victims out there too to protect. So this is a necessary evil of all evil, is to take care of that situation. We need to make sure that our citizens are protected and these criminals have a place to go. And that's how I feel about that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lindahl, same question. What is your view on the recent passing of the bond issue to renovate the Dickinson County Courthouse and the new jail construction?
Well, the failure of the original bond issue vote was part of the reason that I considered running when Laverne announced that he'd rather not. I was concerned about what appeared to be a disconnect between public perception and public officials. When jail doors don't lock reliably, when the electrical system is inadequate and out of date, and when sewer gas backs up into offices, doing something seemed to be a slam dunk to me. The public either didn't agree with the bad condition of the building or didn't believe the commissioners when they told them about the bad condition of the building. In conversations I've had with the public, I listen to concerns, and eventually someone always says, "Are you really sure you want to be a county commissioner?" My first job was at Topeka State Hospital's Alcoholism Treatment Unit, so I'm not particularly afraid of confrontation and conflict. In fact, I know that it saves lives in that situation, and it's the only thing that we can deal with that make progress in the other issues. I've been in Enterprise, Harrington, Hope, Carlton, Woodbine, Navarre, and Pearl Co-op, gotten suggestions and ideas, and been able to visit comfortably with people. I haven't got a single call or a single email though, and I think that it's going to take me going back again and again and again before people really believe that I care about what they say and trust that I will work on it. I'm committed to developing relationships and trust by being available to constituents.
Thank you. Mr. Roller, any additional comments or clarifications on that?
This new jail system coming in, we need to have a master plan of understanding the expenses and maintaining that facility so taxpayers of this county are not straddled with a situation of $15 million. And that's where I put that. The other thing I'd like to say that upholds me very dearly to my heart is I do watch each of the county commission meetings and listen to see what's going on. I don't attend them because of time restraints. But when I watch the county commission meetings and I see our national colors in the wrong position, I have a little trouble feeling proper about it for our servicemen and women who serve. I'd like to see that taken care of regardless of what happens, but I think our colors are presented properly here, presenters right for the national colors and the state colors to the left. Please take a look at that. If anything happened, I'd really like that looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third and final question for the county commission candidates. And Mr. Lindahl, you'll get the first response on this question. It's kind of a forward-looking question, looking ahead, assuming that for each of you, you would have the opportunity to serve in this position. What would you view right now as Dickinson County's greatest opportunity? And it could be more than one thing.
Thank you for that addition. I think we're have tremendous opportunities in Dickinson County. Location is probably key with I-70 as well as Highway 77 and Highway 15. We have a great workforce with a great work ethic. And we also have training readily available throughout outstanding high schools and close vocational schools, community colleges, and four-year colleges. We need to work together to emphasize our tremendous quality of life. We need to directly face challenges such as employer drug tests, housing and poverty issues, so that we have the human capital needed to continue growth. The future is exciting. I expect to drive an electric vehicle sometime in my lifetime. It's even possible that I-70 will be a solar highway at some point in the near future, providing enough electricity to power Dickinson County as well as the vehicles driving on it. I love quotes, and one of my favorites is from Walt Disney. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. We need to encourage dreamers while at the same time encouraging sound business plans. Let's work together to make it happen.
Thank you. Mr. Roller, same question. Right now, what do you view as some of Dickinson County's greatest opportunities?
Some of the greatest opportunities is obviously the landmass that we're located in. And also, Abilene, Dickinson County, believe me, in foreign countries is a big deal. We have a lot of opportunity for tourism, foreign trade. We have great rail systems, those kind of things. So I really feel that we need to push this community harder and move into a new era. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lindahl, any additions to that?
No, we're extremely nonpartisan at this level.
Yeah. Appreciate that at this point in the evening. Okay, we are going to have closing remarks. There are 2 minutes allowed for each of you. If there's something, again, that the questions haven't addressed, but that you feel is pertinent to these voters to understand about you, please share that with us now. And Mr. Lindahl, we're going to start with you.
Sure. The handouts that I've been presenting to people as I go across the first district gives a little bit of my background and information, but on the back it says we need to work together to make Dickinson County a better place for everyone. I feel that I've emphasized being available to people, listening. I don't promise anything, first of all, because even if I am elected, I will be one of 3 people, so I won't get to have my way. I'll have to convince people. And that takes information from the public and negotiating with everyone involved. So that's kind of my core thing, is work together, be available, listen, investigate issues, and report back to people, and just improve communication.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Roller, any final closing comments?
Yes, I'd like to bridge the gap in our county to where we're all working together. I was usually hired for particular jobs as a co-op manager, as a mayor, to get the job done. No lip service, make it happen. And that's been my perspective of what goes on. If you want something done, it's going to happen, as long as it's done right. Do the right thing as we're taught. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you spending this time with us tonight.